Good morning, Joyce.
Hi, Anne.
It's the last day in April. Is it sunny in Boston yet?
It is, and it's exactly the right weather. And
Oh,
the
that's so great.
flowers are out and the trees are blossoming
Oh,
and my allergies. So
are the daffodils out?
yep,
Uh,
they've come and are on their wane. So
Oh,
yeah.
oh. Um, so do you want to talk about sadness?
Sure. We can talk about sadness.
I'm asking you that for two reasons. Sadness has come up with two different adopted people I was working with this week. And one was saying, the dearest, sweetest man was saying that just waking up, he just has that feeling of, I wish I wasn't waking up. Life is hard. And then the other was a woman, delightful woman who is in one of my groups and was saying that she loves hearing the adoptees read their things, but then she gets these waves of sadness. And so I've been thinking about sadness and how um, every time I get really sad, I think it's a new thing. I forget how consistently in my life I have had sort of long and deep waves of sadness that um, could be called depression, but it feels different. It feels like sadness, and it's hard when people around you don't understand why this would happen, and all of a sudden you just start crying for no reason. But increasingly, what I found is that sadness is something that's trying to make its way through my body. And when I get afraid of it, then I have fear and sadness, and it's harder to experience the sadness. So I wanted to talk to you about like adoptees and sadness, and is it okay just to let it run through you? Is it a forever thing, do you think? What's your experience?
Well, the two hardest things to sit with, and as a therapist, you learn this early on. The two hardest things to sit with are anger at the level of rage and sadness at its deepest depths. And it's interesting because anger, it doesn't really exist alone. It's usually there as a cover for sadness. So I think you can tell the amount of sadness that's being repressed by the amount of anger that's exuding. And, helping people to get to their sadness is really important. I think many of the people I've worked with over the years worry that if they let themselves feel sadness, they'll drown in it. They'll never be able to come out of it. It will overtake them in some way. And these are all emotions that we all have and that we all need to have. It's perfectly legitimate, natural, and real to be sad. And to let yourself be sad and crying is really good for you. Tears are really beneficial. There's so many things about sadness that are positive, but I think people have a hard time sitting with you when you're sad. And I think adoptees have learned to accommodate themselves to pleasing people in certain ways. And it's not very pleasing if you're angry all the time or if you're sad all the time. You're not much fun to hang around with if you're being sad. So it takes a real friend or a real therapist or a real coach or a real someone who you can trust to sit with you and let you feel that sadness, or to learn to be comfortable enough and safe enough in yourself to sit with it. And it's really important to know the difference between that and a depression because, your friend who says that he wakes up feeling sad or not wanting to wake up, sometimes people need more than just someone to listen to them. That may be a more organic sadness that needs other kinds of treatment. So it's important to be able to discern what is just real sadness that's absolutely normal, especially if you're going through a loss, if you're going through a grieving process. Of course, you're sad and you don't know when it will hit you. I mean, the wind could blow a certain way and it could remind you of a moment and you could get really sad, or a song could come on the car radio and you could just lose it. These are normal reactions that are part of grieving or sadness or loss. And, it's to embrace those as much as you would embrace joy and happiness and, having something that just cracks you up. Those are normal emotions, and it's important not to suppress them. I mean, you need to suppress them in certain instances. In the middle of a meeting at work, you're not going to burst into tears. I mean, you would ask to be excused and deal with it if you know when it's appropriate and inappropriate. But there are times when you're just doing it because you know other people can't take it. And that's putting other people above yourself. And I don't think that's good for you.
Mhm. Yeah, knowing that other people can't take it. And also, I think for so many people, well, I'll speak for myself, it's the fear that I can't take it.
Mhm.
And what I've found in this past year, where I'm working less and just working more, working less on things that are not my body, and letting my body have the space that it needs to have feelings, and a lot of times separate from other people. Because one thing about sadness is I used to create a lot of stories to explain my sadness because I didn't know where it was coming from. So if I remember being a little kid and trying to think of why I was sad and then creating a story. But then you've complicated the sadness because you've created this story that you say is the reason that you're sad, but it's not. You're just sad. And so I've been experimenting with letting my body and mind feel the sadness and then not create a story about it. And then to actually try to name it in my body, like what does sadness feel like? And it's interesting, it never feels that bad. What feels bad is my head's panic about, is this going to last forever? Am I okay? Will I ever, yeah, will this last forever and am I okay? But like sadness itself just feels like, for me, like a heaviness, don't want to move much, want to be in bed. But that can be very pleasant in a way.
I think the most healthy thing is to move, to keep moving. Whenever you're stuck, that's a red flag. So if you're stuck in sadness,
Mhm.
then it's a time to ask for some support, some help, to look at it in a different way. But if you're rotating through sadness, nothing lasts forever. Your moods change, your feelings change, and that's absolutely normal.
Mhm.
So I think letting yourself go through rotations of feelings is okay. If you get stuck in them, that's when you begin to wonder, wait a minute, what's happening here? So if it becomes too great to
Mhm.
just be sad, some people would use the word wallowing in,
Mhm.
which is a little negative. But if you're stuck in that space, there's something not right about getting stuck.
Yeah, and that's where yeah, I agree with you. And I think that's the line I'm trying to figure out, because as an active person, like, it's been a lifetime of just keep moving,
Mhm.
like because the movement will keep you okay. And so it's interesting to stop the movement, and let the sadness happen and then move again. But for a person that's used to being active, the stopping can feel like stuck,
Yeah.
you know. But I think aren't there ways that you could tell that you're stuck? It's, when you just don't want to get out of bed for more than a couple hours and you don't want to be with anybody, and you. I don't know, what would you, what are some signs of stuck?
Well, it depends. And I think everyone's different. So I would never have a little list that you
Mhm,
check off because I don't think that's fair.
mhm,
But I do think that figuring out, like sometimes you need to just stay quiet. It's
mhm,
sometimes you, and it depends on what it's attached to. And
mhm,
this isn't about telling yourself a story about it necessarily. It's more about figuring it out. If you're going through a loss, if you're going through uh, uh, upcoming change,
mhm,
you're going through an anniversary of something, then you're just as your body might need a rest and you might need to take a day and just do nothing. Your mind may need that also, and you may just find yourself flat for the day, not really feeling a lot, and except maybe some sadness, and that's okay. If it continues, and if it, and the timing is different for everyone, but sometimes you need some downtime. Sometimes you need to just sit in something and feel it. But it's also important to get up and out of it.
mhm,
And the more you know how to do that, the better able you are to have strategies and skills to get yourself through difficult times.
mhm. Yeah, and so much of it, I think, goes back to when we were young, and because most people didn't understand what we were going through emotionally and physically, like we have learned to compensate for fatigue or for confusion, and so there is, I think, something magnificent about an adoptee starting to recognize their feelings and to say, I think I'm tired, I think I'm sad, and to treat themselves in a way that feels appropriate and good. But I think it's a work in progress. It's like when a new parents come home with a baby, it takes them a while to figure out the baby. And I'm finding for my own body, it's just taking a while to figure out what does sadness feel like in this body? What does anger feel like? And then to pay attention and to let it play itself out. So I feel like I'm a 4-year-old and a 60-year-old at the same time.
And that's great to be able to revisit certain things and to make sense of them. And I
Mhm,
think it is complicated in adoption because there is an end.
mhm,
You are okay. You
mhm,
are you are safe. You
mhm,
are doing well, and you're sad.
mhm.
You lost things.
Yeah.
And there'll come times and waves of realizing you lost things and just naming that and
Mhm,
saying something about it can be very comforting. I was thinking today, I had the news on this morning, and
mhm,
it's the 50th anniversary of the end of the Vietnam War.
mhm,
And so I posted something to all the Vietnamese adoptees who were airlifted or who left Vietnam during that time and who lost their identity, lost their families, lost their legacy. And just to name that,
mhm,
that all the other things were about the end of the war and,
mhm,
honoring certain people, and which is all great. But it wasn't really paying attention to what else happened, what happened to those children, what happened to the breaking up of those families, what
mhm,
happened to their loss. So there are things that people wouldn't notice
mhm,
about us because they're not upfront.
mhm,
But I think there's a lot going on for adoptees that includes loss.
mhm.
Um, and it does rotate. It does come up in different ways, and it's important to honor it.
Yeah, I'm glad you wrote that post, and I'm glad you mentioned the and, because it's like, that in some ways I personally feel like I won the golden ticket in life because I get to experience what feels like profound sadness, but also great joy because I'm alive, and in this body, I get to see what it can do in life. And the more feelings that you can experience, the more empathy you can have for other people, and the more you're available to connect with them. So I think it's the fear of the feelings, the fear of the anger, the fear of the sadness that I think creates barriers personally and like relationally. But I imagine, I mean, one reason I enjoy being with you is you have this very grounded presence. And so I think, when people are struggling, it's also really helpful to be around people who feel grounded and safe, just so that you can breathe in their air for a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, so find those people and be those people.
Mm, I love that. Well, you want to end on that note? That's beautiful. Find those people and be those people. I love that. Next week, do you want to talk about the writing course that we're offering together?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
that'd be great.
Okay. Well, Joyce, enjoy the last day of April.
Oh, yes, you too.
I'll see you in May.
Definitely. Bye-bye.
Bye.